Man.
It's ever happened to me in my entire life, certainly, at least in my political life, bar none. So in case you were having an uneventful Monday, welcome back to Candace. An uneventful. Just have to say, it's remarkable that so many people in the chat think that my secret is that I'm pregnant again. That is something that I would tease as unbelievable surprise. That actually would be the least surprising thing ever. But that is not the case. It's actually much crazier. And like I said, I've been holding on to this for a very long time because something happened all the way back in February. And I was sworn to secrecy temporarily, and I feel that today is the correct day to inform audiences because it may have some severe global implications. So here is what happened, all right? The date was Monday, February 24th, and in the early evening, I had just kind of wrapped the show. It was just after 5:30 p.m., to be precise. I received a very strange message from a friend of mine. I'm not going to identify that friend, but the message specifically read, "Hey, I have something to tell you from the White House. They asked me to call you. I'm just the messenger here." Again, strange. I'm just the messenger here, like kind of removing themselves from whatever was going to be said. So I assume it's got to be something weird. And I say, yeah, whatever, give me a call. And so he does call me pretty immediately, by the way. And he says, somebody very high up at the White House has asked me to ask you if, as a favor, you could stop speaking about Brigitte Macron.
Oh, okay.
Like, what? Excuse me? I'm not kidding when I say that in the myriad of possibilities that were floating through my brain about what this phone call was going to be about, that was not one of them. So I'm just kind of having to redirect, and I'm going, what are you talking about? To be clear, we had, ironically, as a podcast, we had just ended our Brigitte Macron series 4 days earlier on February 20th. That's when we released the last episode, which was the epilogue. So I'm going, that doesn't make sense. Why am I getting this phone call now? And obviously, I asked for a little more information. I say, who specifically called you?
Yeah, DFAT, like that's, when the White House reaches out to you, man, that's crazy, man.
And that friend of mine says, it's somebody that has the president's ear. This is somebody important. So I'm thinking, okay, this is advisor, Susie Wiles, I don't know. And I tell my friend, go back to that person and just say I said no. It's free speech. This is obviously an important story to me. The implications here are pretty severe about what I've uncovered. So no deal. Hang up. I go into my husband's office and I tell him what just happened. And honestly, I'm kind of laughing at the absurdity of it because I hadn't thought beyond what may have happened. And then I do what I always do just in case. I call Noah, I call the lawyer, and I'm like, hey, I know.
She said I called Noah.
Macron's sending us legal letters. Just want you to add this onto the pile that somebody at the White House is asking me to just stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Cool. We kind of have a laugh about it, run it different ways. Are we going to expect something else to be delivered to my door? Another threat, implicit threat from the Macrons, somebody calling in a favor, who knows, whatever. Anyways, we do dinner, and I am kind of feeling bad about my pregnant attitude on the phone call, because I was, 8 weeks away from birth, and I was a bit shorter on the phone than I would have been if there wasn't like a growing infant foot that's lodged under my lung. And this person has been very good to me in the past. And so I resolved that before I go to bed, I'll phone him back and have a much more calm conversation. Not that I was rude, but just like, hey, what's this actually about? And so I did. And not only that, before I called this individual back, when I checked online, I realized that Emmanuel Macron is in Washington, D.C., February 24th. He is in Washington, D.C., and he had departed the White House just hours before I received the call. So anyways, I am in awe. A lot of thoughts are running through my mind. What could this possibly be about? And when I call that person back, they tell me something that is even stranger. They say, look, I again am the messenger here. What I was told from somebody that's pretty high up at the White House is that Emmanuel Macron is holding up negotiations to end the Russian and Ukrainian war unless you stop speaking about his wife.
What? No way.
It's pretty high up at the White House is that Emmanuel Macron is holding up negotiations to end the Russian and Ukrainian war unless you stop speaking about his wife. And I'm just going, what? What are you saying? What are we even speaking about? What do you mean negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? I'm just like, looking into a story at my house. I've got a very small team here, and you're telling me that somehow negotiations are being held up and it needs to be communicated to me that I gotta stop talking about Brigitte? What are we saying? And then I'm asking myself in my mind, because I hang up this phone, I am in true shock. Did Emmanuel Macron pretend to fly into D.C. under the guise of negotiations, the Russia-Ukraine war, and then instruct someone on his entourage to have an off-the-books discussion, a little meeting on the side, maybe somebody, again, like a Susie Wiles, where he made his truer demands? Like, hey, this is for the pictures, me and Trump are talking about it, we're going to get it done. And then what really goes on behind the scenes is like, we're not doing anything until that little podcaster, Candace, agrees to shut her mouth. What? This is crazy. This is absolutely insane, okay? So we ended the conversation, I say, I'm going to sleep on this. It's a lot to process. I remember I get into bed, and I just turn to my husband, and I say, no one will ever believe us. Just something that just arrived at me very slowly. I said, no one will ever believe that this just took place. And my husband's like, yeah, no. This is just very, very strange. And I promised the individual that I would pray on it, that I would think further about the situation, what are the implications here. And I then call him back the next day, and I say, look, this is pretty weird. You have to admit this is pretty weird, and you're not really giving me any details, and I kind of want to know who specifically you spoke to, because I think it kind of matters. Is somebody trying to do a side deal while Trump is doing a different deal? And at that moment, he's honest, and he says, no, President Trump was on the phone too. And I go, oh, are you kidding me? You didn't tell me this yesterday? That there was some sort of a conference call and President Trump is on the line? You didn't mention it. Did you lie to me yesterday? Were you trying to pretend that it was like a third-party person? And he says, no, I didn't lie to you. Like, I got a phone call, and I obviously, in the background, Trump communicated something to me, so he was there when the phone call took place. And I'm going, what the heck is going on?
Nah, bro, this is insane. If I'm her, I'd probably stop talking about that person. And I know she's pushing freedom of speech and all of that, but when the president is on a three-way phone call, I don't know, man. This can get. What's going on, Music Junkies podcast? I see you. As a member, this can get pretty crazy.
On. Literally, what is happening right now? So I'm on the phone with him, and I just say, I just need time to process what you're saying. This is so absurd. How could this become an issue that is involving the President of the United States? I'm doing a series on my podcast. And then I just kind of get into mommy mode because it's Tuesday. My daughter's got ballet. I'm at ballet with my daughter, and I get a text message from that person that says, you need to pick up the phone. Somebody from the White House is calling you. And I say, okay, but it happened so quickly. I pick up the phone, and sure enough, it is somebody at the White House that is calling me. It's not Donald Trump, but it's somebody at the White House that is calling me. That's pretty high up, close proximity to Trump. I'm not going to name. And this person just, I assume, has never even watched 1 minute of my content, because, I mean, if there were a guide to how not to approach Candace Owens when you are trying to get something done, he was just following this guide. He could not have been more pompous and more arrogant on the phone. And I would like to contextualize that I'm like pretty heavily pregnant, so like, my my bandwidth for BS or anybody trying to like, well, it was very low. And he essentially says, look, you should do it because it's the president and he's asking you to do it. What else do you want me to say? Just do it. Just stop talking about Brigitte Macron. It's astounding. Reflecting on that level of arrogance because he told you to do it. It's an order, so you should do it. And all I was thinking in my mind before I flew into, a little rage was that expression. Proximity to power can lead others to diluting that they wield it. You're close to power. You think you're now Trump. You're calling me, even if you were Trump, this wouldn't be the way to speak to me. And you're calling me like, that's an order from the president of the United States. So you just do it. No questions asked. Don't even think about freedom of speech. Who cares about that pesky little First Amendments? You got to just do it now. And I just basically say, look, my daughter's crying. She doesn't like when I step out of ballet, even though she can see me. She's, please, mommy, come back in. You're speaking to me inappropriately. And I just say, I don't really care I don't know who you think you're speaking to. This is not how you're getting anything done with me. And I just hang up the phone. I'm like, this is just not a good conversation. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Goodbye. I don't like that at all. And the third party person who had initially told about the situation is trying to calm down. And he calls behind. He's like, no, I don't know why you're spoken to like that. And like, this is still really important. And this really matters to the president, and he's kind of trying to talk me off the pregnancy cliff. And I'm still calm enough that I know that pregnant Candace is not always the most rational Candace, and a little bit of a hothead. And
what's going on, Cart?
And I resolve, as I'm speaking to this situation with my husband, that I should also reach out and maybe call someone who's potentially been in a predicament like this. I don't know. Someone who's got a larger audience than me and kind of call in a favor, because I don't normally text him, but I did reach out to Tucker Carlson. And I just kind of told him the situation and was like, look, this is really weird. No, I don't normally contact you for advice, but I could really use some advice right now because you know how much free speech matters to me and basically how important this particular story is to me because it involves, potentially, not just potentially, like pedophilia, incest, all of these elements. And as a mother, the idea that people this powerful, that the story could be covered, it matters. Like this actually, the truth just matters at the end of the day. But also, like, if I could end the Russian war, and by just stopping this conversation, I would do it. And he comes back with just very sage Tucker Carlson advice, and he says, look, you don't want to have the bloodshed of Christians on your conscience, but also free speech does matter. And you should essentially say you'll do it until, like you're saying, this negotiations are happening now, and you'll agree to do that. But at some point, obviously, you need to inform people about what happened because this is totally crazy. And I say that's actually a very good idea. I feel like that's a very principled position to take. Anyways, I sleep on that. Anger is subsiding. Wake up the next morning. It's February 26th, and I am sitting in the makeup chair, and I get another message that's like, hey, keep your phone on. And I'm going, I really don't want to speak to this advisor anymore. I really don't. Our personalities are not meshing. And anyways, this phone call is coming from Florida. I pick up the phone, and lo and behold, so here's what happened. I'm negotiating this thing. I'm negotiating Ukraine and Russia. You wouldn't believe how many parts are hard. It is President Donald J. Trump. He is calling me, and in true President Trump fashion, he jumps right into the narrative. We're not, hey, how you doing? He just jumps right into the narrative of exactly how this went down. I am literally, it is hard to catch my breath to comprehend that 4 days ago I'm ending a series about Brigitte Macron, and now I'm speaking to the President of the United States, and the topic of conversation, no matter which way you want to slice it, it's about Macron's wife's penis. I mean, there's no other way to say it, right? And so he just jumps right into the narrative. He's like, I'm negotiating. You wouldn't believe how many pieces this person wants this person, if this person wants this, and you have no idea how much is involved when you're trying to get one of these deals done, Anyways, I like Macron. We're speaking at the White House, and I'm walking him to his car. And, you know, he says to me, Mr. President, can I speak to you for a second? I say, of course you can speak to me about anything. What's going on? And he tells me that there's Secret Service all around them. There's SUVs. They're encircled. Macron wants to have a little sidebar. And then Macron says to him, Mr. President, do you know Candace Owens? And I say, yes, of course I know Candace Owens. What's going on? And then the president says to me, you must be a very powerful person, Candace. We're talking about the president of France taking me aside to talk about your podcast. And then he continues his narrative. He tells me that Emmanuel Macron is requesting to his face that I stop speaking about his wife. And one of the things Trump said is like, he tells me, she's old and this is really, really impacting her.
She is a fool, bruh. This is really impacting her. She is funny.
And I'm listening, and he's, in one of Trump monologues, very funny. And then he says, I saw her, Candace, I saw her up close, and she looks like a woman to me. I had dinner with her at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And I explained to him that she has had this amazing doctor who specializes in transgenderism surgeries or feminization procedures. I'm talking to the President of the United States about this, guys. This is crazy. This is wacky. But I'm just giving it as good as I get. Just trying to get him to understand the truth. And then I explained to him why I don't feel so great about this request, because that's the more important part. Like, you are requesting that I really, and despite your reasoning, which is very sound, that I stop telling the truth. And I said to Trump, and I will be honest, that at that moment I realized that one day this is going to go into my autobiography, and so I got to say something funny. And I said to him, respectfully, Mr. President, it's not my fault that he married someone with a penis. He then tells me, we're really close to getting this thing done. He tells me again, Macron's been really good to me. He's been very easy to work with us. He's been a good person. He just wants me to get this one thing done. And he throws in the art of the deal type stuff. He starts complimenting me. He says, Melania loves you. She says, you're so beautiful. I said, thank you, Mr. President. Compliments will get you everywhere in life is my mentality here. And then I say to him what I've agreed to already in the back of my head. I said, look, I'm happy to do this for the short term. Obviously, I don't want to have on my conscience that less Christian men could have died in the East if I just shut up about something. But I'm very clear to him that this is going to be short term, and that I fully expect that in a few months I will be able to speak about this. And this is the point of the conversation where it actually gets quite...
No, this is not AI. This is her talking about this.
Interesting, because he says yes, and I am now adding to you what I sensed. Like, he was about to commit to that, but then it felt to me like someone in the background was like, no, we need this conversation to stop altogether. And he doesn't say no or yes, but he just says, that he really needs to work with Macron long term, and they have this long working relationship. And I was very clear, this is not long term for me. Like, if you're close to this deal, ink it, let's get it done. And then he sort of offers at the end, he says, hey, maybe I can go on your podcast one day. I'm great for ratings. They're so Trumpian. He gave yourself a compliment, so I gave him the Trump right back. And I say respectfully, Mr. President, I'm apparently good for ratings too, because you've got a leader of a country, the president of the country, asking you to ask me to do a favor. So then we end the conversation, and I am just reeling. I can't believe it's even happened. I then go and I immediately tell my husband, and I write down the details of the conversation so that I wouldn't forget the conversation that we were having. And of course, the first thing that I want to say principally is that Emmanuel Macron must step down. Okay? Because if that is true, and I will say that did not come from Trump. He did not say specifically he's holding up negotiations for this, but he did say specifically that they were talking about the Ukraine and Russia war all day, and he's just trying to make it all happen, and that is when Macron took him to the side. So I kind of trust the information who came from that third-party person that what he was being told was that he was holding this up, right? Like Macron's holding this up, a contingency here on whether or not he's going to agree to this sort of international deal is whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife. Yet you got to...
What in the world? He, instead of caring about like stopping a conflict, he's worried about how his wife's feelings are.
Step down, okay? Because there is no greater example of just the lack of morality that a leader can have than his husband, wife putting him on a plane and sending him overseas to make Candace Owens stop speaking about their relationship. That is like, we really all should just take a deep breath here, take a step back, and recognize that he is willing to let bloodshed, he's willing to let people die, okay? And a holdup here is going to be whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife's penis. That's ridiculous. You are not qualified to hold office. I thought that before all of this, just looking at your background. I know you're a fraud. You know you're a fraud. Your wife certainly knows that you are a fraud, but this is reaching levels where you just have to be impeached. That's absurd. That is like, let's get the impeachment trials going. And in my head, I'm thinking to Trump, actually, if you wanted to really negotiate, you could have said to him, how about I go live and tell all those reporters what you just said if you don't sign this document? That's how I would have played it. But, I was like 7 months pregnant. I would have played hard.
Candace is crazy, man.
I don't need to have friends when we're talking about ending bloodshed. But the second thing that I want to say here is that it's occurred to me over time that this is about much more than the Ukrainian-Russian war, right? That is not why his Mr. Macron put him on a plane to go speak to Trump in person about this issue, right? They did that because they are terrified. They are terrified because obviously everything I've uncovered is true. Fiction would not make you do that, okay? You'd go, this is so absurd. It's so crazy. I mean, who's going to believe that? Fiction does not make you fly 9 hours to the United States to ask the president if he has a moment to step aside out of the shot of cameras and speak about your wife, right? We can now, it is confirmed fact, put it on Wikipedia that Brigitte Macron was born Jean-Michel Trump. No, we can just go ahead and do that, right? But what did I hit at that has them really terrified? What was the success of that series? Looking into a web and understanding how deeply sinister whatever it is that is happening in Paris is. Looking into not just the current events, but the historical events. I mean, we put up a map and showed just how often they were involved in these pedophilic scandals. Silly ones. Putting the book for your Andre Gide, an admitted pederast, a guy who outwardly said, yes, I like young boys. And you choose that to be the book in your official portrait as the president of France. Emmanuel Macron did that.
What? Nah. Oh, my God.
I think there's more. I think there's more that they are afraid of. I think that it was a very powerful person, potentially someone more powerful than Brigitte, who told Macron, who is just a total fraud, a puppet, to get on that plane and make this request after they realized that sending legal letters wasn't the best idea. So, what else is it that I've potentially uncovered about France? How does it relate to the United States? I'm going to tell you in just a second. First, I'm going to throw it to some of our sponsors. Let's speak about Preborn because June 24th marks 3 years. All right, you guys. Here's where I'm going to pull it all together for you. Because we all know here's the reality. The greatest trick the devil ever played was making the world believe that he didn't exist. Okay? And I have this thing. Call it my toxic trait. When the media takes me out of context, and then just tells these sort of unbelievable lies about me and my perspectives, I never get discouraged. I just get interested. That's my toxic trait. I get like, you can try to offend me, but I just get interested, especially when they're just being way too over the top, you know? Like Holocaust tonight, whatever it is. If you're just being way too crazy, like self-hating black woman, I'm like, what are you hiding? Like, you're obviously hiding something because you're way too triggered by what is likely, and listeners to the show now know, just a simple fact that I've delivered. And I'll give you an example of that. And I'll tell you how it relates to France and it relates to America. So back actually when I was at the Daily Wire, I did this episode and I was so interested in Sigmund Freud, right? Realizing that this dude was a total perv. I mean,
Yeah, we watched that. Did y'all watch that?
Just a total perv. And I gave examples of his like people that were surrounding him that were pervs, people that had been molesting their children. A lot too many of his friends been molesting their children. And the reaction in the media was to call me unhinged and crazy and to defend Sigmund Freud as if he wasn't the guy who's writing all of these theories saying that like children are sexual and are just attracted to their parents. I mean, like, totally weird. Like, I'm not unhinged. He was unhinged.
Yeah, that was like weird stuff that she uncovered. Yeah.
Obviously.
Not saying she weird, but Sigmund Freud was like weird.
And but them calling me that made me more interested. I'm going, why are you like so committed to defending this dead guy and attacking me? So I'm going to actually learn about Sigmund Freud. Okay. So I ordered a book, and this is a book that was written by, you've heard me mention this before, by David Bakan. It's called Sigmund Freud and the Jewish Mystical Tradition. And essentially this guy posits in this book, and then he's able to verify what initially was his theory in the updated edition. He's able to confirm his theory was correct, that Sigmund Freud actually created the psychoanalyst movements to mainstream his religion, that actually he was practicing the Kabbalah. And if you look at the psychoanalyst early movement, as he does a very good job of assessing, you will recognize that they are mainstreaming the Kabbalah. Okay, so I'm learning about Sigmund Freud, and I happened upon this book, and I'm not just learning about Sigmund Freud, I'm learning about a piece of history that I've never heard about in my entire life. And it concerns this guy, Jacob Frank, okay? Is this man who caused a schism. We always talk about like Christian schisms and and actually every faith has this, obviously, Sunni, the Shiites, but we never have really heard, or at least I hadn't heard about this huge schism that took place amongst people that were Jewish, that there was this huge schism. And it talks about how this guy who thought that he was the Messiah, okay, got into some really perverted things. And I'm just going to just read you this, and I promise you this is so important. I think this is really what it's all about, okay? In this chapter, which is entitled The Frankist Episode, I'll read you a couple of things. It tells us that this guy, Jacob Frank, was born in 1726 in Korolovka on the frontiers of Podolia and Wallachia. It tells us that his father was a Sabbatian who had been expelled from the Jewish community. So again, getting back to this fracture that happened, and essentially people that felt that the old Torah law had been fulfilled and that new messiahs were coming, and one such messiah was this Jacob Frank. It goes on to say the tales which have come down to us indicate that he was what we would today call a psychopathic personality, a person without any strong superego formation. In his new Sabbatian doctrine, he asserted the idea of the Holy Trinity. He distinguished himself between God as having become incarnate, and he assigned the role of Messiah to himself. It says, quote, the idea of a male-female God became the occasion for sexual religious practices. The law, he declared, was dead. The yoke of the old Torah had been broken. I'm going to read that again. The idea of a male-female God became the occasion for sexual religious practices. Okay? And so he would have these
what's going on? We got Sugar Black in here, Mafia, so shout out to y'all.
Sexual parties, the only way to describe it, where they would just do incredibly disgusting things. We'll get more into that later. He then begins to quote this Israeli historian who did a lot of research. I've read his books. His name is Gershom Scholem. And he explains that this religion believed, quote, the mystic does not even recoil before the inference that in a higher sense there is a root of evil, even in God. The doctrine of evil was given support by the thesis that the holy sparks had been scattered, and it was necessary for men to hand themselves into sin in order to regather them. The idea of the holy sin became prominent. Through sin, salvation would come. From the great sinning would emerge a world in which there would no longer be sin. This is starting to sound a lot to me like Schofield Bible principles and like
Schofield Bible principles. Oh.
the whole idea of the rapture. But anyways, he goes on, Frank had declared, quote, I have come to rid the world of all the laws and the statutes which have been in existence hitherto. Another person explaining this line of thought writes, the conception of the Messiah as he who must enter completely into the klippah, the demonic power of the shells, that he may liberate the holiness that is held there, and in doing thus fulfills the purpose of the exile of Israel and redeems Israel and the world in one. But even that is not enough. The holy sin becomes a pattern. Men must hurl themselves into sin in order to tear from it the holy sparks, and soon there is no sin any longer. And then he goes on to speak about how sexuality, like sex stuff, is it hinges upon these sort of sexual parties. He writes, sexuality as the locus for the expression of personal freedom has, of course, deep roots. In the Zohar, the sexual metaphor is used very freely. The Orthodox tradition sharply restricted sexual expression, perhaps as has been suggested by some writers. And it tells us that the movement grew into a violent political threat to the Orthodoxy theocracy, and measures and countermeasures were taken by both sides. The Frankists were placed under excommunication, and the Frankists replied by an attack upon the Talmud, arguing that it was false and harmful. The Frankists even charged that the Talmud made use of Christian blood obligatory, and they lent testimony that the Jews were engaging in ritual murder. The climax of Frank's career came when he and all of his followers were converted to Catholicism with great pomp and ceremony. The members of the Polish nobility acted as sponsors, and the newly baptized Jews assumed their family names. Numbers of them thus came into Polish nobility. Jacob Frank himself had King Augustus III as his godfather and became a Catholic in the presence of the royal family and the court dignitaries in November of 1759, less than 100 years after the apostasy of Sabbatai Zevi, and less than 100 years before the birth of Sigmund Freud. Now, let me tell you why I'm telling you this. So I'm interested in that. Someone who's thinking about becoming a Catholic, as I was, is learning that, whoa, okay, wait a second. I learned more about Jacob Frank. I realized that they believed that you had to practice incest as a sacrament. They believed that they basically just had to keep intermarrying one another and that they would achieve power. They believed in the cult of military. Essentially, like I said, going deeper into sin, the greatest sin that you could commit, because he said, I'll bring you down into the depths, would be this act of pedophilia. That they were having these rituals. I learned he entered the Catholic Church, so I'm not just going to end with that book. I need to learn everything I can about this guy, right? Because what's going on here? And the more I learned about him, I was positively astounded that they practiced also apostasy. So they believed that the way to take down your enemies was to convert into their faiths. If you wanted to take down Christianity, you had to become a Christian, and then from within, you could break down the church. Think about what the world was.
Somebody said, go Candace, not afraid, do the hard digging.
You know, the empires were Christian at this time, and they did this. His followers did this. They mass converted multiple times. We then learned that Frankists convert earlier in that earlier episode.
If you're getting an echo, try to refresh.
He becomes Muslim. The Sabbatians became Muslim. So but they're all the same family, which is crazy. And so in trying to learn more about Jacob Frank, I'm buying all these books, and I'm going, is this cult still alive today? Is this really over? Because suddenly I talk about it on a podcast.
You also have to alter the audio a little bit. In order to get stuff like this to pass, I have to alter the audio a little bit.
And I've got all of these organizations screaming at me, going, this is a fringe cult, it's over. This isn't happening anymore. It's irrelevant. Oh, but they lied. Of course they lied, because when you freak out about something you shouldn't freak out about, this was really a fringe cult and it's so over. Why do you care? Like, why do you care if we're talking about something that's over? You know? Oh, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And let me tell you guys, what I discovered right away was not only was this cult not over, but that it made it here to the United States. And we kind of like elected a Supreme Court justice that believed in this. Like that Louis Brandeis came from a family of Frankists. See, Jacob Frank had sexual relations with his daughter. They believed in incest. They believed in breeding. You had to constantly have tons of children. And she became, because they were trying to kind of put the Catholic tradition on its head, they turned her into sort of like the unholy Mary. I know I feel blasphemous even saying that, but this is the reality of what these people believed in. And I'm just showing you this article, which explicitly says that we know, can you pull up this JSTOR article, Skylar, just so we can pull this up here? Yeah, meet Ava Frank, the first Jewish female Messiah. I want to show you this last sentence here. This is crazy. It tells us at the very end, that paragraph, here we go, so we don't have to even buy it. Like, there we go. So it says, we know that U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis had such a portrait, speaking about Ava Frank, given to him by his mother, descended from a prominent line of Jews who continued to revere Ava Frank. And I looked into it, and she carried on for her father. Her father became a baron. Jacob Frank became a baron, like Baron Frank, who had a castle in Offenbach, Germany. These rituals were happening. And one of the things that they concerned themselves with was chemistry, starting like pharmaceuticals, right? And you go, what the heck is going on here? And then Ava Frank, before she died, wrote these red letters and told all of her followers, like, if you believe in this Frankist, this Frankist cult, then you need to apostatize again, like convert into various Protestant faiths, Christian faiths, and hide yourselves. These were called red letters that she sent to all of her faithful followers. But you're never going to guess, French people that are watching this, because everywhere I look, I'm starting to try to chase this like Frankist movement. Where is it? Its tentacles are everywhere. Then I buy a book from Gershom Scholem, that Israeli historian, and this book is called From Frankism to Jacobinism. Oh, like you're talking like the Jacobins, like the French Revolution, which was started. And lo and behold, I learn that one of the people that funded this movement in a very big way, and you may have heard his name, Junius Frey, that was his French name, because part of this movement, they believed, again, apostasy, take on a different character. It's like theater. Become someone else, be convincing about who you are, and we'll take over the world. And Junius Frey, actually, his real name when he was born was Moses Dobrushka. He was the cousin of Jacob Frank, and he learned French, went down into Strasbourg, and began funding people. He rented a house, actually, and began funding people, writing, publishing about this revolution that needed to happen, fostering a revolutionary spirit. Can you pull up Moses Dobrushka's Wikipedia? Because this is really, truly incredible. It tells you Moses Dobrushka, alias Junius Frey. He was a writer, a poet, and a revolutionary. He converted from Judaism to the Catholic faith. He took the name first, Franz Thomas Schonfeld. So he apostatized once, became Franz Thomas Schonfeld, then did it again after he was elevated to the nobility in Vienna. So a lot of them were in Vienna. This book kind of makes that clear. Then became Franz Thomas Edler von Schonfeld. Then he became Junius Frey. You can see that in 1792, in the wake of the French Revolution, he traveled to Strasbourg to Paris and became a Jacobin, changing his name once again to Junius Frey. The new name derived from Junius, from the Roman Judy family that fostered the famous tyrant slayer Brutus. I am telling you guys, when you start looking into this and you realize that these people had a plot to crush.
Shout out to Mafioso, he said, love how Candace is so detailed when it comes to exposing things. Digging in the crates to get the truth out. Protect Candace at all cost. Yeah, she definitely knows what she's doing. CJ Kelly said, in all states and countries.
Empires, and they just converted, and because then people don't know what's happening. Then, whoa, you're in the Catholic Church. You're going, what are these something pedophile scandals? What's happening? What genius? And at the same time, you're just intermarrying within your own family, and they had faithful followers. It is one of the things that has really blown my mind, because we know that this sort of modern over-sexualized culture, whenever you speak to academics about it, they're like, well, it began in French, right? The French Revolution was sexual. And then I learned this, and I realized that there is a theology to this, that people actually believe in this, and the fact that you are not allowed to speak about this without reporters coming to attack you should concern you. That tells you something's not dead, right? Something is not dead if you can't talk about it. And no one would care. Like I said, if you talk about weird things that took place in history, it's just interesting. But you have all of these writers trying to protect this little piece of history. And we learned that these people became very involved with public. They knew that they had to control publishing houses. They created the music. There was so much writing. And it is interesting when you recognize that it made it all the way to America. Lyndon Baines Johnson was by the way, very, very, very obsessed with a couple of weird things that happened into America. We should probably get into that on my book club, because I don't want to get banned for speaking about that. Ooh, someone's calling me. I hope it's not the White House. It's not okay. And
Somebody's calling me. Hope it's not the White House.
it's been interesting. It's been interesting to also recognize that a lot of this history is just being hidden from us. And when I think about us barreling toward this AI destination, which I think is happening right now, and children, so many of them who can't even read, who don't have the attention span to be able to read, who are asking AI questions and thinking that they're getting the true answers. I can just imagine a time where they just rinse the internet of all of this stuff, where people are no longer able to read books or don't want to read books, whatever it is, and they don't know this history. It's why I started my book club, because I was just amazed at how much happened that I don't know about. And I realized how much power we give the school system, the public school system, the publishing houses, to tell us what we need to know. That's it. Oh, the French Revolution, don't look at beyond that. It's just, some frisky French people, and here's what happened, and then that's it. No, but everything, as my husband told me when I asked him why he decided to master in theology, why were you so driven toward theology when you went to university? And he says, because everything is theology. Everything's faith. Faith is what guides people, right? And you think about Sigmund Freud turning his faith into something modern, right? Making you not even believe it's a faith, that it's a psychoanalytic movement. Oh, no, that's not a faith. That's what this book, at least, spells out pretty clearly with a lot of evidence. Yeah, that they could baptize you into their faith and you don't even realize it. And we're learning about this sort of mixture of the male and the female. That's what he believed in. And suddenly we're looking up and you've got all of these psychiatrists who are telling us that no, transgenderism is totally a thing. I find that to be interesting, at least compelling, something that we can talk about. That's interesting, very interesting. And now we have in Paris, Brigitte Macron. And rather than the publications being interested in that, they block it. They say, oh, no, that's a crazy conspiracy. We could not have produced more evidence that something is not right there. And they will not even look at it. What does that tell you? Who is in power? Who are these people that are in power? I'll tell you one thing.
Yeah, she got him, yeah.
They are people that understand the threat of anybody learning that this could potentially be a theology that is operating in plain sight. And like I said, I think in my book club last week, I said, are we the muggles? To use a Harry Potter expression here, are we the muggles? We have been led to believe that we're atheists, right? And I'm kind of going back to the old we. Atheism, your grandparents were crazy to believe in the Lord, and oh my gosh, no, this is the new age. You're smarter. It's all about the self, what you can do. You're an atheist. There's no such thing as an atheist. There's no such thing as an atheist. You believe in something, and if somebody has turned you into a muggle while they very much believe God is real, because they created a whole doctrine and a philosophy that they are following, trying to convince us that they are the gods, right? that they can turn society into whatever it is they want, keeping us blinded because we don't realize that this is a spiritual battle, but they know it is, and they're fighting for your spirit and they're winning. Yeah.
What y'all think about this? I don't know. Anthony says, what's going on, Anthony? What's up, JR? You said faith guides me. She's saying that you gotta believe in something. Like, so there's no atheist. Y'all think about that. You said she should have recorded the conversation with Trump. If she did that, trust me, she would be in big trouble. You know what I mean? Like, but they probably caught her off guard as well. You know, she didn't know he was going to be on the line. So this is very interesting. Like, they don't want to do negotiations until she stops blogging on his wife. Like, what? Somebody said, I love Candace hardcore. Said she just blabbing on. No. Shout out to Candace. But it just shows like the power of her platform. What does she got now? She got 4.3 million followers. When we were like covering her, she had 1.7 million. And she just like flying up. And this was like from what, last year? And she literally just gained like, yeah, like she's gained millions of people following her since then. She's smart. And then she just went on Jubilee to debate like these women who ended up losing horribly to Candace.
Pretty interesting stuff. Anyways, I gave you a lot to consider here. People.
And you also got to play it safe. Like, she's not like a regular blogger. You know what I mean? Like, if she ends up trying to expose them or something like that, man, they will come after her with everything they have. This is the American government. You know, she's got to be super careful about what she does.
Are obviously all over the world waking up, and people are choosing goodness or they are choosing evil. And I will tell you that it feels almost like these events are being catalyzed. You're suddenly seeing people who you thought were real and honest and recognizing that they lie, whether that's a pastor.
I will say she's better than some soap operas. The way she explains things is hilarious.
Whether that's a political person that you follow, whether it's a newspaper organization that you're reading. I hope the point of this podcast, if you take anything away from my podcast, it's that you need to constantly examine who you're listening to and read these books, like educate yourself. And once you become educated, like I have said since the beginning of my career, an educated mind cannot be enslaved. And you'll start to previously examine your earlier enslavements.
An educated mind cannot be enslaved. Say it again, Candace.
And I could say a lot, but I'd save the rest of it for my book club because we're reading a lot of this on my book club. And we'll save it for there. By the way, if you want to join the book club, CandaceOwens.com. I see that they put a little prompt up. So,
all right, I want to hear what Carolyn Levitt's been saying. A little bit of her.
President Trump will travel to the great state of Florida to attend the opening of a new illegal alien detention center located at Dade Collier Training and Transition Airport alongside Secretary Kristi Noem, Governor Ron DeSantis, Congressman Byron Donalds, and other state and local leaders. We hope to see many of you there. The facility is in the heart of the Everglades and will be informally known as Alligator Alcatraz. There is only one road leading in, and the only way out is a one-way flight. It is isolated and surrounded by dangerous wildlife and unforgiving terrain. The facility will have up to 5,000 beds to house, process, and deport criminal illegal aliens. This is an efficient and low-cost way to help carry out the largest mass deportation campaign in American history. We are truly coming off a historic week of President Trump racking up win after win on behalf of the American people. President Trump restored peace through strength and acted decisively as commander-in-chief to obliterate the immediate threat of the Iranian regime's nuclear capabilities and then brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, which continues to hold. Then, the president traveled to the Netherlands and achieved a monumental win for the United States.
Exactly. Adora Anana said, educated mind cannot be enslaved.
And the NATO alliance by getting our allies to dedicate 5% of their GDPs to military spending. As a result of President Trump unleashing American energy dominance, summer gas prices are at the lowest they have been in 4 years, heading into the July 4th week. And with the incoming Trump economic boom, the stock market continues to roar back, with the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both hitting record highs.
I'm telling y'all, man, like how I played it, and I'm not going to tell y'all how to do the stock market. When they start giving negative press on the stock market, oh, the stocks are so low, man, I be buying up everything, bro. Everything. It doesn't matter if it's Tesla, whatever. Like if it's low, especially S&P 500, I'm buying every time there is a dip. Like y'all got to understand, like we all work, you know, some of you guys like are in here, you know, business owners and stuff like that, but you know, I work, like, you know, I don't want to work forever. Like you have to like plan for retirement, you know, and you don't want to be buying stocks when they're high. I don't understand why people do that. Like buy them when they're low and sit back and wait. This is retirement, gang. Like, you know, so, and then betting against Trump, you're going to lose every time.
And on this point of an economic boom, I bring to you original correspondence from the President of the United States to our Fed Chair, Jerome Powell. As the President has consistently stated, the American economy is booming. And there were so many economic analysts who said that this president's policies would drive our economy down, when in fact we have seen the opposite. We've seen a massive deregulation campaign take place. We've seen inflation completely diminished from where it was under the reckless spending and the bad policies of the previous incompetent administration. I would remind the Fed chair, and I would remind the entire world, that this is a president who was a businessman first, and he knows what he is doing. He has a proven economic formula that worked in his first term as president, and it is working again. The one problem that remains is high interest rates for the American people. The American people...
And she's going to go ahead and show... We might have to do this on a different live, man. Because it's a lot of like important stuff she's about to cover. Like as far as the interest rates, like how much we pay in interest rates is astronomical compared to other countries. We're going to have to do this on another live. But shout out to everybody. You know what I mean? We might come back later or tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to all the subscribers. I appreciate y'all. Shout out to Candace Owens. I don't want to take anything away from her thunder. You know, we covered her. Appreciate her, everything she's been doing. You know, and we will continue to follow up. Shout out to everybody. I'm out, y'all. Peace.